The 2020 Major League Baseball season is not going to be canceled. But what do all the changes this season mean for sports bettors? Can you still make money betting this season? More importantly, are there ways to make consistent money every season? Welcome back to aosportspicks TV. I'm Alpha Omega. Now that we are well into the Major League Baseball regular season, I think it's safe to be cautiously optimistic that the baseball season is not going to be canceled, and Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred might actually deserve some credit for pulling this off. Let's be real. I'm not letting him off the hook for the Astros sign-stealing fiasco and how that was handled. But considering that I couldn't find a single major sports book still taking bets on whether or not the season will be completed, I think it's safe to say that baseball is going to make it through the entire season. According to the New York Post, more executives have grown optimistic that a season will be completed, as protocols and routines have improved and most teams have avoided the virus. Now that we've cautiously established that the season is likely to finish, let's start by explaining the major rule changes this year and the factors that make this Major League Baseball season unique. Most importantly, how you can take these factors and use them to your advantage to make winning sports bets. Because of the uncertainty of betting, when a player can not only get injured, but can also get sick and be out 10 days or more, be careful of laying a heavy favorite. Recently, there was an article on ESPN talking about whether it's a good bet to lay minus 1,600 on the Dodgers to make the playoffs. At first glance, this may seem like easy money, but in sports betting, there's really no such thing as easy money. Considering how short the MLB season is this year, with only 60 games versus the normal 162, and with the second game of a doubleheader being only a 7-inning game, and then also factoring in the possibility of players getting sick, getting injured, or even a slump, it's just bad business to lay a heavy favorite no matter how sure you are of the odds. Especially this season, you should consider doing the exact opposite. Teams like the Miami Marlins or the Cincinnati Reds have extremely long odds and future wagers, but for once you're not tying up your money for 6 months. And with the possibility of more heavily favored teams getting sick, losing players, or as we've already seen, a team like the Marlins can go on a hot streak. Any team could potentially ride that hot streak all the way into the playoffs or even a division title. If that sounds like crazy talk, just remember the world champion Washington Nationals last year. The Nats were atrocious in the first part of the season, but Washington got hot in the second half and rode that wave all the way to a World Series title. As WTOP Washington states, last year the Nationals played their 60th of 162 games on June 4th and came back to beat the visiting Chicago White Sox 9-5 in an interleague matchup to improve their record to 27-33. The change from 162 games to 60 games is not the only variable to consider when placing bets this year. Major League Baseball has implemented a universal DH rule, which according to MLB.com, both leagues will use the DH to avoid overtaxing pitchers by having them hit. If your first thought is that with a universal DH there's going to be increased scoring in the National League, meaning more overs in National League games, I understand why you would think that, but in this case you'd be wrong. I'm going to use some basic math, but I promise nothing too complicated, so stick with me. The National League has used the designated hitter when playing the American League since 1997, which means there is a healthy sample size of games to base projections around. The sample size shows that the National League scoring average is 0.13 runs with a DH. So, extrapolating that to a National League versus National League situation, a rough estimate would be 0.26 more runs per game. The 0.26 runs is not insignificant, but not as big of a deviation as you might expect, meaning the betting marketplace may overvalue the DH throughout the season. Another rule implemented for the 2020 season is the 3-batter per pitcher rule, or the 3-batter minimum rule, which requires pitchers to either face a minimum of 3 batters in an appearance or pitch to the end of a half inning, with exceptions for injuries and illnesses. As with the universal DH rule change, your initial reaction might be that this new rule will lead to an increase in hits, particularly for left-handed power hitters. The hypothetical increase would be because the rule supposedly eliminates so-called pitching specialists. You may have heard these pitchers referred to as a loogie, an acronym meaning lefty one-out guy, primarily brought in for certain matchups. So, does this new 3-batter minimum rule actually lead to an increase in hits? Not really. In all the controversy, it seems that the second part of the rule, or pitch to the end of the half inning, is being overlooked. Meaning if the left-handed power hitter comes up with 2 outs, the loogie only needs to get that 1 out. Then the inning ends and the specialist has done his job. Even with 1 out, that's only 2 potential batters. This rule change has been hyped up by the sports media, but understanding the difference between useful and useless information is a fundamental tool needed to become a winning sports bettor. A less important but equally hyped rule change is the expanded roster granted for each team. Standard MLB rules allow for 26-player active rosters. Teams were to be at a 30-player limit for the start of the 2020 season and then shrink to 28. Then the rules called for teams to be down to the standard 26-player limit by August 20th and to stay at that level through the postseason. In essence, that final step down has been eliminated, and teams will be at 28 players on the active roster for the remainder of the 2020 season. Like I said, a lot of hype around this rule change, but the extra spots on the roster will most likely be pitchers, and this new rule isn't likely to make a difference overall. Finally, let's go over the rule change with the most potential profitability for the 2020 season, the extra innings rule. Each extra inning will begin with a runner on second base. The runner placed on second base at the start of each half inning shall be the player in the batting order immediately preceding that half inning's leadoff hitter. Meaning, if the number 5 hitter in the batting order is due up to lead off the 10th inning, the number 4 hitter shall begin the inning on second base. Starting at the beginning of a half inning with no runners on base with no outs, the expected number of runs scored is 0.54 runs, so about half a run. But if a team starts with a runner on second with no outs, the expected number of runs jumps to 1.17 runs per half inning. That's a huge difference. To make it simpler, according to Fangraphs.com, the percentage of a run being scored in a half inning goes from around 27% to 61%. Using last year's data, only around 9% of games went into extra innings. And while we may not see many games go deep into extra innings because of this rule, what is certain is that we will see an increased amount of scoring in extra inning games. Will any of these rules stick around past the 2020 season? The 3-batter minimum rule is permanent and has been planned for a while now. And according to the Washington Post, the plan is for the extra inning rule to go away in 2021, but there's a chance it could become permanent, along with the universal designated hitter when the collective bargaining agreement expires after next season. In baseball, more than any other sport, all it takes is one angle for you to make money. Meaning, if you've discovered something that is not being accounted for by the marketplace, you can take that one piece of information and make consistent money taking advantage of it. I'm going to give you a few examples of these types of angles, including some specific to 2020 that have been used by myself and other sports bettors to make a profit, as well as general concepts to keep in mind when betting on baseball. But more important to your long-term success as a sports bettor, what I want you to take away from this is beginning to think about the thought process involved in betting on baseball and understanding why I'm giving you these examples. So keep watching and I'll try to explain it for you. What you're looking at here is Baltimore Orioles first baseman Chris Davis's yearly stats for the last 5 seasons, beginning with his last high production season in 2015. You don't need to be a statistician to notice the nosedive Davis has taken since 2015. Coincidentally, during the 2015 offseason, Davis signed his $161 million guaranteed contract. My point is that every year we see outliers, meaning single-season individual performances that don't line up with that player's prior performance. In a shortened season with only 60 games, the profitability of identifying an outlier performer, whether to bet on the game, the total, or even player props, can make you quick hitter money before the bookie even knows you walked in the back door. Along with outlier performances for the 2020 season, it's crucial to be aware of sudden and unexpected lineup changes. An example from the Akron Beacon Journal. The fates of Mike Clevinger and Zach Plesac remain unknown, and some decisions are looming for the Indians. Clevinger and Plesac are both pitching on regular throwing programs after being optioned to the Indians' alternate site at Lake County. Both pitchers broke the team's health protocols in Chicago. Clevinger and Plesac are 2 of Cleveland's top pitchers. While their absence is self-inflicted, any situation where important players are absent obviously not only affect season win totals, but also how you bet on a game-by-game basis. While our country remains in this situation, teams are going to be very sensitive about the health of their players. And if someone is not feeling 100%, that player will probably be scratched from that night's lineup. Knowing that type of lineup information before the books do can turn into a whale type of bet that all sports bettors dream of. Because of that, Major League Baseball is trying to control the flow of information. According to the Action Network, Major League Baseball is mandating that managers send their lineup cards into the commissioner's office before releasing them to reporters and players prior to games. Here's how the process will work. The manager will submit the lineup card directly to the league. This usually occurs 2 to 3 hours before a game. Sources say that the information will then be sent to data providers like Sports Radar, who will put it out to the public and all the sports books at the same time. Managers can release the lineups in the stadium as soon as baseball confirms they have been processed, or 15 minutes after a manager submits the lineup, whichever comes sooner. There is an information war this year, with the sportsbooks holding an edge over the bettor in the fact that they can adjust their lines immediately based on the bets of sharp bettors, which in turn makes it more difficult for the average bettor to hold an edge. This year, with the expanded playoff format of 16 teams, the playoff races are going to be hotly contested. CBS Sports provides an easy explanation of how the playoffs will work this year. For each league, the division winners will be seeded 1 to 3. The second place teams will be seeded 4 to 6, and the final 2 wildcard teams will be seeded 7 to 8, for a total of 16 teams. With the trade deadline set for August 31st, there may be some big moves and more big moves than normal because of the shortened season, and especially because of the lack of revenue with no fans. A lot of owners may feel the economic crunch because they didn't make money this year without fans. And these ownership groups will need to find a way to accommodate their team payroll. So there may be situations where a good player will be on the market, or there may be a surprise move to dump some salary off of their payroll, and vice versa. There may be owners in the middle of the now expanded playoff race who feel that the best way to make money long-term is a win-now attitude, and those teams may be willing to overpay for a player that the broke team wants to get rid of. This is another reason to keep an eye on the futures market at all times, because these changes could have massive effects on the futures market. So you need to be prepared to jump on something as soon as the move is announced. Let's quickly talk about betting run lines. The run line is baseball's version of a point spread. Run lines are either 1.5 or in rare cases 2.5 runs. The run line on the same game might look like this. With the run line, if you bet on the Reds, who have been given 1.5 runs, you must bet $175 to win $100. However, the Pirates, who are listed at minus 1.5 runs, in essence spotting the Reds a run and a half, now have underdog odds, as you can wager just $100 to win $155. Run lines can be extremely profitable, but it's never a smart decision to buy a run or a half run because there is a quantifiable amount of money that one run is worth, and no sportsbook is going to give you that price. They're always going to charge more than it's worth. But the opposite is also true. There is almost always value in selling a half run back to a sportsbook. The Bleacher Report provides a rough explanation. Alternate run line betting can be used whenever a team you feel has the overwhelming advantage when matched up against a team littered with injuries, has played numerous games in a row, or had its bullpen roasted the previous game with a poor starting pitcher going the next day. Another issue to be mindful of is putting too much weight into prior statistics. Similar to statistical data from the NBA 10 years ago, before the three-pointer became such a big deal. Baseball is the same. While there is some debate, I think most anyone who follows baseball felt that the balls were juiced up last year, meaning that there were a lot more home runs. Balls that are normally pop-ups were turning into home runs, things like that. So using statistics from prior years to measure outcomes this year is a losing proposition. The same is true for the playoffs. Last year, the MLB juiced up the ball during the regular season, but then took the juice back out of the ball during the playoffs because they found that the regular season games were going on too long. Forbes Online illustrates my point. In 2019, 6,776 home runs were hit, almost 700 more than in any other season, and only the second time that the 6,000 threshold was reached. The ball wasn't hit any harder last season, it just went farther. It was the season of the happy fun ball. The results have not carried over to the 2020 season. There are 10 new managers of teams this year. While some of them are retreads, not in their first major league managerial role, it doesn't change the fact that at least some of these managers are coming into completely new situations and may be unfamiliar with how to mix and match situational lineups and situational pitching. These types of changes can drastically change the way you bet on a team throughout the season. Take the San Francisco Giants and their new manager, Gabe Kapler. According to the Bleacher Report, Kapler seemed like an inspired choice when the Phillies hired him as their manager in October 2017. His 12 years of playing experience and persona as a muscle man with a sabermetrician's mind helped counterbalance his sparse coaching resume. Yet Kapler embarked on a gaffe-addled voyage that saw him rack up a 161-163 record, prompting the Phillies to sack him. Kapler trends more toward analytics and sabermetrics and is taking over for laid-back veteran manager Bruce Bochy, who managed a veteran ball club. And it's not only a good idea to bet the under on the Giants' win total and situationally fade the Giants on a game-by-game basis, but thus far, it appears that when the Giants get into late, close-game situations, the team hasn't responded to Kapler in the same way the team responded to the markedly different managerial style of Bruce Bochy. Now, the long-term success of Kapler as a manager is an argument for another day. But a new manager who hasn't had enough time to figure out how to manage his new team is the perfect storm for you and I making money. Think about it like a ceiling and a floor. When you look at the team's win total, or when you're looking to bet on or against a team, do you feel like that matchup or that win total is the ceiling of the team or the floor of that team, or is the team priced correctly? Determining the ceiling and the floor also works on an organizational level. Understanding an organization can help answer questions if injuries happen. Are the bench players competent? Have they been full-time starters before, but have they shifted into a bench role because they're now on a better team? Or are they blocked by a better player? Do they have help in the minor leagues that's ready to come up if necessary? Determining an organizational ceiling and floor can help you answer those questions. The Braves, according to the MLB Farm System rankings, have a bunch of pitching depth. The Braves also have one of the best outfield prospect duos in all of baseball. If Atlanta runs into injuries or problems in those two areas, it's not really something to be overly concerned about, even if the sports media tries to make a big deal about it, or if the sports betting marketplace over-adjusts to the news. That could be a perfect opportunity to make money. The Indians are in the opposite situation. Cleveland is incredibly top-heavy, and they have nowhere near the same level of minor league talent ready to come up. If injuries hit the Indians, that could be a very big deal for sports bettors. And if injuries do happen, you need to be ready to fire right away and get your money down. It's also important to remember that minor leaguers are very difficult to project by nature. Alex Isherwood from Pitcher Lists, who focuses on projecting minor leaguers, admits, predicting which prospects will be successful in the major leagues is hard. With so many factors to consider, even the best prospect rankings are littered with a mix of successes and failures. So basically what you're really looking for is, if an injury takes place, can this minor leaguer step into the role and produce somewhere close to league average? Or is the minor leaguer projected to be better than league average, or potentially worse than league average? All of those things factor into roster composition when discussing win totals or variance when these injuries first take place. When attempting to project the success of any team, the first thing you need to do is identify the teams that are in prime position for regression. Let me explain using the San Francisco Giants as an example. From NBC Sports, joining the proud ranks of the 2012 Orioles, 2016 Rangers, and 2018 Mariners, the 2019 Giants take the crown as the luckiest club in baseball last year. Despite being the sixth least talented in the league, 17.6 team Fangraphs wins above replacement, they were able to finish 75-85, only the 18th best record in the league. So half of the Giants' total wins last season were by one run, and with most of the key components of their 2019 bullpen being traded, then adding to that the change in manager and managerial style we discussed earlier, and finally, projecting whether anyone on the team is poised for a big year. In this case, the answer is no. So you take all of that together and see if that has been factored into the team win total. And when you realize that it hasn't, feel free to fade the Giants and fire at will to get down as much money as possible. Fangraphs currently has the 2020 San Francisco Giants bullpen ranked dead last, including minus 1.9 wins above replacement. So, knowing what we now know about the 2020 Giants and understanding that the sports betting marketplace will quickly adjust based on what we know, how can you still make money betting on the team? Teams with poor bullpens are perfect for betting the first 5 inning lines. You take the team in the first 5 innings, which can prevent the Giants' bullpen from blowing up your bet in the later innings. Finally, let's talk about the Cincinnati Reds, a popular team with both casual bettors and professionals. So why are the Reds so popular this year? Let's follow the same formula we just did with the Giants. The Reds upgraded in the offseason. They got Nick Castellanos, pitcher Wade Miley, international star Shogo Akiyama, veteran Mike Moustakas, and relief pitcher Pedro Strop, all of which are expected to be solid contributors. That's step one. The Reds were 12 games under 500 last year, but their run differential was only minus 10, which means Cincinnati was actually closer to an 80-win team. Step two. Finally, last year the Reds got unlucky. From the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Reds had a 22-31 record in one-run games, the most one-run losses in baseball. Cincinnati is a team in line for positive regression, and this year things are more likely to turn around. Step three. So, using the method of identifying and projecting personnel additions and losses, players, managers, etc., determining team-level variance, record in one-run games, personnel injuries, etc., and personnel projections, will players have a better or worse season than the year before? You can project how well a team will perform. This is not overly complicated, but can prove very valuable when betting win totals or even on a game-by-game basis. If you've listened to the information I've given you throughout the video, your knowledge of how to bet during the shortened 2020 season, how to predict outcomes on an organizational level, a team level, and a player level, as well as how to bet on baseball in general on a game-by-game basis has increased. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section and I'll make sure and answer them for you. Also, consider heading over to my website, aosportspicks.com, and signing up for a sports betting package. Finally, make sure and subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and click the notification bell so you can stay updated and get notified whenever I release a new video. Once again, I'm Alpha Omega. See you next time.